We've all heard of endangered animals and species, but have you ever heard of an endangered language? Now, you might be thinking, I don't care about dead languages that no one uses. I only speak English in my house. Well, now more than ever, language preservation has become a growing problem. English is the dominant language of the business world, and it is a common second language. In fact, most people who speak English are from non-English speaking countries. Even countries like Sweden, India, South Africa, Trinidad and Tobago have added English to their official list of national languages. English is rapidly expanding in place of more culturally diverse languages, pushing native languages outside of their own boundaries. This is a process called linguistic equilibrium. Linguistic equilibrium is a process that will, according to UNESCO, eventually narrow down the world's languages to under 50. The grimmest predictions have 90% of the world's languages dying out by the end of this century. According to the Atlas of World's Languages in Danger, between 1950 and 2010, 230 languages disintegrated into distant memories. Today, 1/3 of the world's languages have fewer than 1,000 speakers to carry on their jargon. It is estimated that every 2 weeks, at least one language dies with its last speaker. Now, why is this a problem? Each language holds a special key that has the power to unlock secrets such as culture, history, and knowledge. When a language dies, these secrets die with it. Simply put, the death of a language is like the death of a person. Linguistic diversity allows a vast majority of people to express their ideas in different ways, shapes, and form. Furthermore, languages act as a bond, holding various countries together. Two countries who are able to speak the same language share a commonality. A perfect example would be the bond that Latin American countries share towards their neighboring states. So why is this happening? Why are languages dying? Well, believe it or not, it's not just the rise of English. It's one of the main causes is climate change. Drought, extreme weather, and spikes in temperature cause people to be displaced. Natural disasters and terrible living conditions are forcing relocation among countless people worldwide. Corneg's Regan Campbell estimate that over 6 million people were forced out of Syrian seaside due to rapid spikes in tides. Because of this, civilians were forced to drop their mother tongue, attempt to learn new languages, as they tried to start from scratch. Another factor to consider is urbanization. This forces linguistically unique rural communities to migrate and assimilate into new and more modern communities in order to make a living. Additionally, for much of the 20th century, governments across the world have enforced language upon indigenous people, often posing threats. Numerous examples of this coercion exist right here in North America, in which our nation's first people have either lost or are in grave danger of losing any working knowledge of their mother tongue. These include the Ayak, a language from Alaska, the Yana of the Yahi people, the Tillamook, the Susquehannock, the Abnaki, and the Atacapa, and countless others. As for me, I am the son of 2 Colombian immigrants. Although I was born in the United States, Spanish was my first language. And it was all that me and my family spoke in our house. However, when I first entered school, this affected me. I had a lack of knowledge over certain words. I had an accent, and it was very difficult for me to communicate with my classmates. Naturally, I felt a need to perfect my English. I read plenty of books and started speaking English with my parents at home. I spent extra hours after soccer practices just to work on my pronunciation and my reading. It took me some time, but once I reached 7th grade, I had one of the best reading comprehension and vocabulary skills in my grade. I perfected my English, and I lost my funny accent. But I did it at the expense of Spanish. The more and more I spoke English, the less and less that I spoke Spanish. And there were various things, such as accents and articles, that I never learned. I would say la problema instead of el problema. And yeah, it even does sound stupid if you don't speak Spanish. I never learned accents, so I could neither read nor write in Spanish. But the problem wasn't just the grammar. It was my communication and my understanding. I became limited in my conversation with family members. I understood the stories, but never the meaning or the emotional attachment behind them. In the summer of 2016, I moved to Bogota, Colombia. Okay. My family had moved in the hopes that I would learn more about the country and the culture that my parents had grown up in. And I learned about class division. Colombian culture, and South American history. But most importantly, I started speaking Spanish perfectly again. I was forced to learn grammar. I also understood Spanish text and art. Understanding simple things in pronunciation made me able to identify how authors used the fluid and melodic language of Spanish to evoke certain tones and ideas that just weren't really possible in English. Certain literary techniques just simply worked better because there were different sounds and different words. I began to connect more with my family. I understood puns, and I could laugh at their jokes and their ingenious banter. I understood the meaning behind sayings that I had heard so often, but never really understood. But most importantly, I understood pain. In 2011, my grandmother, Pia, went through one of the most difficult moments in her life. Her mother, Julia, known to me as Jeja, had passed away. You know, I never knew why we called her Jeja. I guess maybe it just sounded like her. And then just a year later, my grandfather passed away unexpectedly. This affected her. My abuela started speaking differently. She started using different words and sayings. Ahí vamos, became her new favorite thing to say. It literally translates to, we're going. So we would make fun of her and say, Grandma, where are we going though? But we all truly knew that it meant we're still going. We're still going through the pain. We're still going through the suffering. She also used less expression when it came to accentation. In Spanish, to show strong emotion, people will often emphasize the syllable with the accent. For example, como becomes como. Por qué becomes por qué. These words mean how and why respectively, but the emphasis that you put on these words changes the meaning. In English, we tend to say the entire word louder, as opposed to just the accented syllable. My grandma was no longer doing this, and I wasn't able to identify and understand it. It was very sad. I couldn't empathize with her just because I didn't understand the language. But as I began to spend more time with my family in Colombia, I learned about them. I became absorbed in Rolo, or Bogota culture as we call it, I started thinking like a Rolo, acting like a Rolo. So naturally, I started talking like one. In Colombia, accents are also a reflection of social class. The upper class will say, o sea, weón, with a low tone and less punctuation to convey, the sense of classy, effortless power. My lower class soccer teammates would say, no, marica, in a higher pitched, more fluctuating tone. This conveyed a sense of mischievous, yet light-hearted vibe. These people were from the same city, and most of them might have even known each other. Yet they talked differently. They represented different ideals, and they conveyed that through language. Language must live on. Imagine how much we as a society are missing out on by letting languages die so often. How many groups of people and their values are being forgotten? How many ideas and ways of thinking are we losing just because we never got to know them? Let's not push languages out of our own boundaries out of existence. Thank you.